Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar today, AI Impact on Loss Prevention Technologies. I'm Greg Buzek, President of IHL Group, and with me today is Brian Brinkmann, Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Agilence,
Great to be here,
and
Greg.
Lee Holman from IHL. So we're gonna get moving real quickly here. As always, we will turn the cameras off and get right into the content here to make things fast. But first of all, just want to thank Agilence for the sponsoring this content so we can make it available to you and do this webinar and pay for the platform and all that fun stuff that we do there. We're grateful to Agilence for their support for this and as well. So chat is open. So go ahead and open up your chat there. Tell us where you're from, who your team is. Are you heartbroken on the football games this past weekend? Were you a Miami fan that watched things slip out? Were you a Texas fan that saw Oklahoma come back there at the end with a major drive? Or are you one of the fans of the team like Georgia that just showed up there, or Alabama that seems to be back? Or maybe you're a pro fan. Just let us know where you're from. If you're a fan of a team, just a way to get the interaction going there. So chat is open on the right side there for those things. So, all right. So with that, we are going to jump right in, and I'm going to start with the unemployment numbers, which are somewhat of the good news right now in the economy. I want to start with some good news here. So jobs are up. And like anything in our economy, things that are look like good news could potentially be bad news. And that's no different here with the situation with job creation. As long as unemployment is down, there's a risk that rates may continue to go up from the Fed. But the Fed numbers show 336,000 increase in jobs there. But you can dig a little bit further behind the data and see some things that are also positive. We're finally starting to see the males, the labor participation rate for the most employable ages are finally back to where we were prior to I'm sorry if I'm reading this correctly. Prior to the recession there with COVID, we're back to where we were in 2019. Now that has dropped considerably from 1980, but at least we're back to where we were prior to the pandemic there for things. But there's a lingering thing, and I see this every time I go to a conference, and that is, the government keeps putting out all this positive news. The president comes out and says all this prominent news. I love this headline. Americans still think the economy stinks. Here's why. And it was a great article. But when you look deeper into those employment things, this is the reason why. The jobs were all coming from the government for that job growth. So there's just a massive change in jobs in government payroll. So these are IRS agents. These are people working in passports. They're people working in local government. There, it is not private payroll. So that's one of the reasons. The other aspect of it is inflation itself. So we are literally at a point where inflation is coming down, thankfully, but it's still much higher than we've seen for recent years. The CPI came out this morning, and it showed a dip, or stayed the same, from August. There, we've come down quite a bit. There, the core continues to come down, but still over 4%. There at 4.1%. Now, my preferred inflation gauge is from Trueflation, and I'll get to that in a second here. But this shows you the individual components of things. Now, I heard this one the other day that orange juice. I'm not a big orange juice drinker, but orange juice is up considerably right now, being a key driver. And you see it from other things there as well. If anybody's had their insurance bill change, whether it's homeowners insurance or vehicle insurance, you've seen huge spikes there, as well as the tickets to sporting events have gone up significantly for things there. But anything related to cars is up considerably year to year, and which is changing the dynamics. It's no longer the supermarket that is driving the inflation. Now, Trueflation, this chart has actually been updated in the last hour. They have this number at 2.51. They have it down to 2.37 as of today. I just didn't have time to update the slides from the time they reported that. So, which is fascinating, and I love the way Trueflation does things. And they have a new measure, though, which is aggregated inflation from the previous 3 years. What they're trying to do is get a feel for prior to the pandemic or even early in the pandemic. So they looked at the last 3 years. And so the actual purchasing power for the US consumer is down 20.4% from 3 years ago. And so that is the biggest reason we feel that way, that we feel like the economy is not great, even though the government keeps putting out numbers that are supposedly positive related to that. Now, if you think that's bad here in the US, they also have a factor related to the UK, and it shows that the average purchasing power in the UK is down 33% since the same time frame of October of 2020. I really love the way these guys do things. They're building their business and growing. It's kind of like Nielsen looks at inflation rather than the government data, which tends to be 2 to 3 months behind. And the reason we know that is because when you look at the gasoline and the fuel, we're actually seeing the prices come down in the last 10 days there and spike significantly early on in September. And yet the government data shows a very modest increase when we saw a pretty significant increase earlier in the month. So I think that government data is off, where this is on a week-to-week basis. They update their numbers here. So you can pay attention to that. I highly recommend you taking a look at that for what's really going on with inflation. What's driving the inflation right now is shelter and services. Now, this is a look into the future, though, with the producer price inflation. And unfortunately, we saw it bottom out in June and start to creep back up again there. So this is the lagging behind. So we're seeing that inflation number is going to continue to increase, not go down there on a product basis here. Now, we've seen the products are not the big issue here. It's more the services and the shelter, the transportation services, which is driving the increases. But this is something to be concerned about as we go forward, and the potential does the Fed raise rates there. As I mentioned, the food pricing is coming down considerably. What's really interesting about this chart, this was a chart from 2 months ago, and we are roughly at that point for third quarter of that inflation rate there by Nielsen and JP Morgan. So this is almost right on of where they're targeting for inflation. What's driving things? It's gas. It's all things related to transportation and shelter there. And it's not just gas. So when we look at gas here, we actually saw a drop, as I mentioned here, a drop of about 19 cents in the last 2 weeks for fuel. That dropped considerably there. It was up as high as 380, I guess 385 the last time I had looked at this chart, down to 366. That's obviously good news, but we've got about $48 billion less for consumers to spend elsewhere as a result of increases in gas prices for the year. And it doesn't get any better. Certainly the events in Ukraine and now in Gaza and Israel, the tragic situation there with this war is putting added pressure on fuel prices as well as just macroeconomic factors. But we've got an issue where we've depleted the strategic oil reserves to try to lower the prices of gas when the Saudis and the Russians decreased output there. So we've got to get that back up, and the only way that happens is it drives prices up for everybody else. So that is our challenge there. Unless we open up drilling and things and leases and stuff here in the United States again, which I don't think is going to happen under this administration, which means we've got these forces that are pushing up inflation going forward, just simply because of the economics of the situation. But it's not just gasoline. It is the diesel fuel as well, which puts pressure on the supply chain. Now, that diesel fuel doesn't have a really big impact on your shelter costs, but it certainly does in terms of your transportation services and the overall retail products and goods there. So right now, the vast majority of inflation when it comes to products is not from the source. It's actually in the transportation process once it gets to the United States there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Just a reminder where we've been, retail sales. We added India's total retail sales for 2021. We added as growth here in the United States, and then in the UK number for 2022, we added the UK as growth in 2022. Those numbers are gone. That was fed by increased government handouts and spend. And we're now starting to see some things start to level out. So this chart, the chart itself, looks back at April, where we were spending about $200 billion more than what we were spending in 2019 in the same month. That has dropped to about 150 billion. We're still spending more related to that. So that's kind of like adding a Home Depot every month compared to where we were prior to the pandemic. Once again, that's heavily fueled by increases and handouts from the government associated with that. Retail sales with the government reports, it's nice and rosy, everything up 2.6%. The numbers come out next Monday, so I don't have the September numbers. Nice and rosy, but when you factor inflation in, we're down 4.6% year to year on August. And for the year, we're down 2.1% for the year on the data. So how's the consumer feeling? The consumer has been on this milk train, so to speak, for quite a while. Been spending considerably more than what they've been taking in from income and benefits for the last, 2 years. Ever since the government started handing out money, you can see the number grow in 2021 and go above that line. That is starting to come down, and it's going to come down sharply for a lot of different reasons. First of all, this excess money is gone. That money is gone. This was a view of the $1.9 trillion that was excess that was drawn down coming to June. We only had 200 billion left in June. That money is long gone at this point out of the 2.1 trillion that the government gave away during the pandemic to stimulate the economy. Where it's hitting the most, obviously, households with less than $50,000. For households over $100,000, it's more something to complain about than it is true hardship. But it's really a hardship for those who are in fixed incomes and in households below $50,000. Their purchase ability is down over 25%, just about 25% from where we were prior to the pandemic of September 2020 there. So big issues. People are being squeezed, and that's having some pretty significant impact on where people shop for food in particular. The good news is that we are still above in terms of earnings growth, above where the CPI is now after a long period where the prices grew faster. So that's a positive. We've got lots of strikes going on right now, whether it's on Hollywood or in Detroit. There with the auto workers, that'll jump the earnings once that number comes through. Just simply the sheer number of people, and that they turned down an agreement for 30%, I think, hikes. So that should see a jump, and that affects this going forward. But with those inflation pressures, who knows? With things going forward. But just to say right now, this is somewhat positive that wages are above the CPI at the moment. What is gone to Pluto and is really scary is what's happened to house prices. The average house right now, I believe, is $426,000. To give you an idea where we were 3 years ago, we had a 2.98% mortgage rate for 30 years. The average home was $294,000. Today we are over 8.3%. I think we're at 8.35 as of today. for a 30-year mortgage, and in the existing home, median price is $426,000. So you need $85,200 for a down payment if you want 20% down, and you saw your monthly payment go from $987 a month to almost $2,600 now if you buy that same home. The good news, most people aren't buying a new house. They're in their existing home and have a low rate mortgage. This is a graph. I throw this in here. You can look at it later. It just shows you what the curve is based on where interest rates are and level of home price that can be afforded. So we're starting to see balances creep up, delinquencies start to creep up on things such as auto loans and credit cards. The average auto loan is now well over 8% now coming from the dealers for things there as well. And the average credit card rate is now 20% that people are paying. Some major jump in interest rates for those cards. Of course, we have the student loans repayment happening there. There's obviously been a lot of news and a lot. I believe it's 126 billion now has been forgiven this year by the president. So some of this is not as impacted here. It certainly is adding to the debt. We've added $500 billion to the debt in about 3 weeks, which is a big issue going forward, but we don't have time to get into that today. So what's the good news, Greg? I mean, that's the challenge with all this stuff. And I believe it or not, I found some good news. And I don't know if my mom's on the call, but she's been yelling at me for years about this. And that is the fact that the incomes for those 65 and older are continuing to increase as a share of the consumer spending. They're up to 22% here in August of total spending for things. The wealth of those households has gone up considerably as well over the last several years, driving increases there. And then when you look at the change in household spending, they're up considerably higher than everybody else. They're almost double that of people under the age of 40 in spending. The challenge for retail is they don't necessarily buy more groceries or buy more clothes or things like that. What they do is buy experiences, and they're spending more on vacations, spending more on eating out. Those are the areas which are seeing the big growth areas. It's not your traditional staples for things. What about trade? Okay, so trade right now, 68% of U.S. retailers say they've got too much inventory already, and that is shown up in what's happening in terms of the transfer of containers. So we're seeing a dramatic takeaway from China in terms of the U.S. consumers and U.S. retailers and where they're sourcing goods from. Here. It was as high as 22% prior to the pandemic. We're down under 15% now of our goods coming from China, with growth in Mexico and Asia outside of China, and in the EU and the UK. We're seeing major growth there, and to a certain degree Canada, although to a lesser extent for things. This shows you the rapid drop in the price of a container coming from China to the East Coast and also to Northern Europe. These numbers were as high as $22,000 for an expedited container in October of 2021 coming to the U.S. West Coast. And that's down now under $2,000 for that same container. So the market prices are down 90% from just a year ago there for shipping a container. And when you can factor in that 95% of all goods that are manufactured come through a shipping container, that's a big issue. And as I mentioned, retailers have reported a dramatic drop with the decline in ocean shipping expenses there for the year. So that brings me to inventory distortion, and this narrows us down more into our topic today of loss prevention. So $1.77 trillion related to inventory distortion, out of stocks and overstocks. 68% of that is due to out of stocks, of which North America, which we're going to talk about today, is about $244 billion of that total impact, that cost of out of stocks there. Now, when you look at the blame for inventory distortion overall, you see that theft and employee theft and consumer theft alone are running in the $370 billion range there. That's a worldwide figure that we're showing there. We saw improvements in out of stock in every region except in North America. And the reason for that is we've had massive theft. Everything is locked up on in the stores, particularly on the coast. Even consumer staples there. We've got some data I think we'll talk about a little bit later, maybe in Q&A, about where the organized retail crime has grown the most. And you're kind of looking at it here. These kind of products that can be easily pilfered and not as traceable as other particular products there. But it's an endemic that's everywhere in the country, and it's spread now overseas. The UK is having similar issues there. Organized retail crime, in our estimation, is now a $100 billion problem here in the United States. This is a big problem, a big issue here. Now, why is our number different than that was released by the NRF? Mainly because the NRF doesn't look at all the retail segments. For instance, convenience stores are not included in the number. Restaurants are not included in the number. Hotels is not included in the numbers. This number here for us includes those segments. So it's retail and hospitality, $100 billion cost for organized retail crime today. Now, to put that in perspective here, at a 25% or a 5% net profit, a retailer has to make 15 additional sales there to break even on a theft of one item. So they're making a bet that 14 times they can lose a sale and still come out ahead from somebody ripping them off for one item. It's just horrible numbers to work with there. So that gets us to how you fix inventory distortion. Well, a key part of that is loss prevention and LP technologies, whether it's analytics versus some of the other technologies that are out there today. We're seeing some of those technologies that are physical security things not working as well as they have in the past, mainly because the laws are against that and making it much more difficult to deal with things. So the bottom line is retailers have to do more with less. And with that, I'm going to bring Brian back on, and he's going to share a little bit about Agilence. So Brian, come on.
Thanks, Greg. So just as a quick way of introduction, Agilence has been providing industry-leading loss prevention analytics and case management for over 15 years. We are using over 200 brands at over 85,000 locations across retail, restaurants, grocers, convenience stores, pharmacies, and hotels. On any given day, we analyze well over 40 million transactions. But we're not just a tech company that focuses on getting your data analytics correct. We're also a company of retail experts and former practitioners that ensure you are successful. Our customer success team has won awards for being the customer success team of the year for 6 years in a row. We just have a relentless focus on our customer success. We commissioned a study by a third-party market research company who found our customers on average receive a 33x ROI, broke even in 38 days, and on average are realizing $5 million of extra profits from our loss prevention analytics. So it stands to reason why our customers love us. 98% stay with us. Net Promoter Score 65 means that they would recommend us to someone else, and that's almost double industry average for SaaS companies. So with that very brief introduction, let me jump in. So what Greg asked me to do is talk about some ways that you can use AI for loss prevention. The ones I'm going to talk about today are really around leveraging data to reduce loss in your companies. So let me start with risk scores. Most everyone creates some kind of risk score to help them spot theft. And those risk scores are very useful and they're based on our experience. But we know there are signals in the data that can provide us better information. The great thing about AI is we can analyze that data to build better risk scores that can predict potential fraudulent behaviors and patterns. These stores can be at any level, whether it's a store level or employee level, regional level. It's up to you to what makes the most sense. Another great thing about these types of AI generated risk scores is that they can remove biases, right? So sometimes as we're creating manual scores, we might be familiar or be friends with employees. The AI takes all that bias out and it really gives us a clear picture of what's going on. So these AI generated risk scores can be very powerful to uncover variables that are just better predictors of risks. And of course, that's going to help us operate our businesses more effectively. Another area where AI can really help us is forecasting potential future issues. So I'm not talking about forecasting sales. I'm talking about forecasting where the next problem is going to be. So, as operators, we know a lot about our business. We know that fraud occurs at the end of the day. We know at self-checkout registers, people are scanning a lot of low dollar values that are probably, gaming the system. We know that restaurants, if bills have a lot of high tips, it means they're probably compensated the server for something they did wrong. $0 sales. We know all these things, right? These are things we get from our experience. But AI can help us augment that experience to find sales and operating patterns that really can become or could become problematic. AI can help us find those future potential issues. And if they can find those issues, we can take actions proactively. Like we can conduct cycle counts to make sure there's inventory. We can conduct audits to ensure that there's proper training or awareness to handle incidents. And what's also good is when we find these problems, it might not be at a store that you operate, but it might be somewhere else, but it might be coming to you. So we can start to put proactive measures and programs and processes in place so we can curb those before they happen. So there's a lot of loss prevention that we can get ahead of, so we continue to have a solid business impact. One of my favorites is really around associating events and incidents. We all have crime, we all have incidents, slip and falls, we have assaults. These are events that create cases for us to investigate and analyze. What's great about AI is they can help us find relationships within those incidents and events and detect patterns. That lets us make some operational improvements. That might be as simple as changing our cleaning routines or when we stock our stocking schedules, all things that can help us reduce incidents. But what's more importantly, and as you looked at that absolutely just bananas number Greg had on organized retail crime, is AI can help us associate cases across stores, districts, regions. Those associations help us uncover larger systemic problems such as organized retail crime. There's not a week that goes by that we don't read or see a case in the news of large theft groups stealing. They affect the safety of our people. They even force stores to close in our communities. Using AI to correlate these cases, really help us shut down these organized retail crime rings. They help us prevent future crime, and they help us keep our businesses open and our neighborhoods safe. I mean, this is a real community impact that ORC is having that's really affecting everyone's day-to-day life. It's not really just isolated to certain areas, to certain people. Similarly, there's another standard practice for most of us is conduct audits, right? We do this to make sure our stores are in compliance, we make sure of safety, accurate inventory, training. There's many things we do with audits. What's really compelling about AI and generative AI is it can start to understand these audit scenarios and discover patterns. And with that knowledge and learning, it can generate recommended action plans so our staff doesn't have to. And those plans can be very specific, and there can be many of them. So these types of plans that would normally take us a long time to do with employees can be done very quickly. And it really doesn't end there, right? So we can start collecting data on the recommendation effectiveness, and we can learn from that, and that will help us feed and improve the recommendations themselves. So this allows companies to move far quicker and be more productive and efficient. So it is really a very virtuous cycle. Certainly one of my favorites is the use of AI. It's very promising for for natural language queries. So this is a great example of generative AI. Most of us are skilled operators, and we're not trained data scientists. All applications require training. In the case of analytic applications, this often means understanding data, attributes, dimensions, metrics, filters, alerts, KPIs, hierarchies. All these things become the building blocks of our dashboards, reports, and analyses. With natural language queries, people can get their answers by simply typing in text. And this can really open up access to essential information to more people throughout the organization to really help them make better decisions. That increased access to information can also work across departments to improve collaboration and coordination. So you can really see that we're starting to get a multiplicative effect in a positive way of the sharing the information. It speeds things up. It's super convenient, and it really can help too with ADA accessibility. It's just a way to create a window into the information that really everybody should have, but maybe before this point couldn't. Sorry about that, Greg. There we go. Thank you. Certainly the last one, and probably the one that I'm the most excited about, is really about using AI to find the signals and indicators in our data. AI is really good at sourcing things we can't figure out on our own, or something that would take us a very long time. But when you let AI scour through the data, it can discover these signals and these indicators that can help us predict fraud with higher accuracy, and even allow us to create new KPIs that can improve our business. This really helps employees save time by directing them to the places to look first. AI is not the end. AI is really the beginning. We still need to work with people so they can assess what the AI information is telling us, but it really gets us to be far more productive as we use that information. And of course, this has a big impact on organized retail crime again. If we can start to discover patterns sooner that allow us to prevent organized retail crime events, it can have a really sizable positive impact on profits, especially when you start thinking about applying that not just to your store, but many stores in many regions. And for many national businesses, the impact is in the tens of millions of dollars. On a different side, you can also use AI to help with KPIs. So it's not just about finding things that create theft, but we might be able to find better ways to measure our success. We all have well-known metrics we use to run our business, right? There's profit, there's margin, but are there other ones out there we don't know? And so in a similar way, AI can help us really discover and create some of those new KPIs that could positively impact the operations. Like Greg has said many times, and I think he's probably going to talk about it here in a little bit, it all starts with data. And as you imagine, if you bring in more data, such as RFID data, alarm data, video, sensors, temperature, crime statistics, all that creates more fertile territory for AI to have an even greater impact in your organization. So certainly there are a lot more examples I can talk about where AI can make a difference for loss prevention. But at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Greg, and he's going to share some more research that really starts to quantify that impact. Greg?
Yep, terrific, Brian. Thanks so much. And thanks again to Agilence for making this content available here. So, we have, if you've been on our webinars before, you've seen this chart many times there, but we've entered a new season this past year in particular, where we started looking at AI and machine learning on store operational issues. And then we had the dawn of generative AI here that is now starting to play out. And it's a game changer. There's no question there's a game changer. So many of you know that we created an AI forecasting model on AI impact economically in the retail industry. And we're projecting $9.2 trillion in impact through the end of the decade to retail worldwide, which seems like an absolutely huge number. But I'll tell you, when you work from the bottom up with the largest retailers, this number may be a low when we look at things. Beginning of the decade, we're looking at traditional AI ML being the primary driver. Towards the end of the decade, it's a partnership with generative AI on top of the clean data that's accurate, tagged, etc. That traditional AI and ML has. That generative on top of that having an impact. Now, why we think that? So, for instance, if you've used ChatGPT or any of these other tools, you know when you give it context and you give it some things to start with, you get much better results. And that's what we're thinking about here when it comes to how generative AI is going to add to those items going forward there. Biggest segments of impact, pure play e-commerce is the number one segment, groceries number two, hypermarkets, specialty hard goods. The reason for that is cookie cutter operations, massive amounts of data, large volume, large dollars that are involved. There is clearly an impact due to size. 72% of all AI economic impact we are projecting comes from retailers over $1 billion in size. We once said that the pandemic and the government's actions was the largest transfer of money from small to big retailers that we had ever seen. This could prove to be bigger just because the benefits of AI. And I'm going to share some results here as we get going here. Now, when it comes to generative AI, which is what everybody's excited about here, we're projecting $4.4 trillion in benefits by the year 2029. Now, those are broken down by increase in sales, improvements in gross margins, and then cost improvements related to SG&A, which is really the big area where we see the major impact for Gen AI as a higher percentage of the overall benefits that are coming from AI is going to be in that sales and general administrative area. So we don't have time to go through all these tools today. However, I wanted to get you guys access to this, and I'm going to share this now on the screen. These are some of my favorite tools that I'm using now. I wanted to allow you to understand about that. And also, I've got an ongoing list that I keep of tools and videos and things related to that. So TextBlaze, Guide with 2 Ds, Harpa AI, which is fantastic, Chrome add-on there, Write Sonic, My Mind, which is just great for remembering things, fantastic tool. And then HeyGen, there's some videos in there on HeyGen and avatars and things like that that I highly recommend that you guys take a look at that. So what's the impact to sales? Well, we're talking about what's the value of 1 to 2 more additional sales per year per customer through improved product recommendation, personalized promotions and pricing, increased customer engagement, or quite simply having the product on the shelf because it didn't get stolen. A major opportunity there to improve the actual sales for retailers as a result of that. Gross margin impacts. We got better supplier negotiations. Walmart has already saved 3% on their store fixtures when they've used generative AI to negotiate with their suppliers. And the suppliers actually rated it higher because the AI was always looking for new solutions, was always polite, and it didn't take breaks. It didn't have bad days. And they were able to get to agreements much faster and a lower cost to Walmart as a result of that. Inventory optimization, demand forecasting, routing and logistics. It's estimated that over 50% of the trucks on the road are less than half full right now, so we're spending a ton of money on fuel, the impact on the environment there, but also financially, it's just not a good situation for things there. And then quality control and negotiations, loss prevention tools that we're talking about here today. Big opportunities, mostly with the traditional AI and ML, the predictive scenarios that Brian talked about, as well as prescriptive analytics for things there. It's important now. I did want to bring up, we're going to get to Q&A here real quick. So if you go to the chat over there, you can start answering or asking your questions in that, and we'll get to those probably in about 5 minutes for questions. So Then you've got after that, you've got the SG&A impact. So you've got the automation of routine tasks, reduction of labor costs, etc. Here, there are many, many, many areas here where generative AI can shine the brightest for things, and it's really, really fascinating to watch that. And if you start playing with those tools that I shared with you earlier, you'll see this impact on your own productivity very, very quickly. And understanding that most people on this call sit in the SG&A column of cost of the retailer and or the vendor you work for. And when you see how much more productive you can be, you can see how you can do more with less, and you can grow the store count without necessarily adding the same level of people that are required to do that. So let's talk narrowed down to loss prevention. And this is where the rubber meets the road, really. And that is that profit winner. So these are people that grew their profits 15% or more in 2022. Okay, 55% of them plan to have prescriptive analytics and using that for loss prevention by the end of this year. The impact is tremendous in the fact that 340% of the fastest growing retailers and 600% growth in the highest profit retailers in terms of growth in the deployment of analytics in loss prevention going forward as a way to mitigate those losses and stuff. Now, we've got some data that just literally came out yesterday. That's actually not out. You're the first people to see it. And our new survey that we are doing with RIS News that we won't even formally release until January, we tracked 11 different categories of AI and the impact on retail performance. And what we have seen is the retailers that are using AI today in their loss prevention activities are seeing sales growth for 2023 that is 2.2 times or up 120% higher than those that don't. Their profits are up 2.6 or 155% higher than those that don't use AI in their loss prevention activities today. And then when you look forward to 2024, they are far more looking forward to 24 in terms of improved profitability there. Sales growth 151% higher as their projections, and their profit growth 195% higher than their others. So almost 3 times the profit growth in the stores that are using the companies that are using AI and machine learning for loss prevention today. So major impacts. And this is not the only area where we're seeing this, where the AI is having tremendous impacts on the financial performance and the financial expectations of the retailers as they're going forward. So it is more transformational than perhaps we even forecasted. Here is what the data that we're seeing so far, and just a massive impact for things. So here's the slide overall. So this is just one of the things that we'll be doing with AI. We've got a number of products here. I don't need to go through all of them, but we've got the forecast. We've got the overall summary of the forecast that's available. These will be in the slides, which we'll share with you in just a second. We now have our AI readiness index, which ranks individual retailers. We are looking at Amazon, potential impact of $316 billion to Amazon's bottom line and $264 billion to Walmart's bottom line. We're tracking 212 public retailers and rank them according to their AI readiness with an algorithm and leveraging our Sophia data that we have on publicly available data for that. That's available. And then, as I mentioned, we've got this AI LP survey results. We can't release the full report until January, but we now have that data. So if you're in another field other than loss prevention, we've got that data available for you. So that's there. Now, shifting gears here before we go to Q&A, and I'm going to put the slides up here while this is showing here. There we go. All right. So I've put the slides in the handouts now, so you can get a copy of the slides here. Just the other hat I wear is leading the ragtag group of people in the industry that help orphans and vulnerable kids. We just use our knowledge and our networks and our skill sets to make a difference. And we have a fundraiser called Super Saturday. It's an analyst day. It's content like this. We've got 3 sessions on AI case studies that are going to be a part of that. Our keynote speaker is going to be Daryl McDaniels of Run DMC. He's got an amazing story, and he will be with us live in New York. This is the Saturday of NRF there. And to spice it up for retailers, we're giving away free tickets for 2 to the Final Four. You can pick the ladies or the women's Final Four or the men's this year if you want to see Caitlin Clark play there against UConn or LSU or whatever if they're back in it. To see who the best players are in college basketball. You'll get that opportunity to win there. It is free for retailers to attend. We make the money on the sponsorships. And through this day, we've been able to help 325,000 kids in the last 15 years because people came to analyst content like this one day early before NRF. And so we tried to beef it up to get people there this year. It's at Microsoft's Manhattan headquarters right on Times Square. And we hope you can enjoy us and join us there. More details right there. You can click the QR code for that. And with that, we're up for Q&A. And we're going to turn the cameras back on and join the stage. And hopefully Lee's internet is going to hang on here and he's going to be able to ask us those
You
questions.
had me concerned there. I thought it was just me.
No, it was just you.
All right. Brian, following up on your chat response to Ed, have Gen AI tools been added to the Agilence solution and take it beyond traditional AI ML?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. So we have created some pretty smart predictive risk scores and some forecasts, but we are definitely adding a lot and expect to be introducing things throughout the first half of 2024. We'll probably make some larger announcements around the NRF timeframe, but what you can expect to see is some of the things I highlighted today. Maybe not all the things you saw highlighted today are things that we are actively working on. We're very excited. We are piloting some of these with our beta testing these with some of our customers now. And the results have been very interesting. Places we thought we were going to be successful, we failed. And places we didn't expect, suddenly we found light. So it's been very illuminating, but there'll be a lot in 2024.
Okay. This one's for you, Greg. With inflation apparently growing again, are we looking at a greater risk of recession?
I would say yes, although it really depends on employment. If employment stays up,
Private.
Well, overall employment. I mean, the government can stave off the things by adding, jobs to the government. We got to pay for that eventually. And we didn't get into the debt and all those aspects, but that is a big, major issue there. So, but the likelihood is more than it was, and certainly the war in Israel is in Gaza is the tragedy of that is not helping avoid the recession there.
Okay. Brian, here's another one for you. Where does computer vision fit in your loss prevention solutions?
Yeah, great question. So today we integrate with most, computer vision video type vendors. Typically that today means we can augment our analytics with confirming video evidence. Increasingly, what we're seeing around computer vision is another source of data. So I mentioned that toward the tail end of my remarks. The video actually provides a lot of information around the metadata, people coming in, places they're dwelling, kind of hotspots, if you will, in the store. That level of data, when fed into models, can actually also create indicators and signals that that there are potential areas. We were I'll give you an example. When we were, many of us, maybe on this call too, were at the Loss Prevention Research Council meeting last week and listening to Department of Homeland Security investigator talk about credit gift card fraud. What they found is that people were lingering at the gift card stand for a long time, and what they were doing is scoping out serial numbers. Well, if we get some of that information from computer vision, that will certainly help. There's been a lot too on the video side in terms of facial recognition that really are starting to help identify potential bad actors. And I think one of the things that's interesting is as we think about hardware, whether that's RFID, serialized tags, alarms in conjunction with analytics, all working together really helps to bring about kind of the best solution possible. So short answer is yes. I think there's a lot of good uses, both from a preventative perspective as well as a forensic perspective.
Okay. I'm going to handle this one, Greg. Disregarding the various media postings of extreme ORC and LP, which retail segments are hardest hit in terms of organized retail crime and loss prevention? Again, from the RIS news survey work that we've been doing, we're showing that drugstores have the highest increase in loss prevention and ORC in the past year. 17.4% increase, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, the drugstores are the worst because they've got Class A drugs as well. I was at the Apex Users Conference last year, and a major drug chain said that during the protests, legitimate protests regarding George Floyd around the country that happened, when the bad guys showed up to take advantage of that, they lost 200 stores worth of merchandise in drugstores because people tried to get in to get the drugs as well as wipe out the shelves on everything else. There, it's just honestly just evil in our world when people try to do something for good, somebody shows up and they try to take advantage of the crowd, to do harm. It's just, we're seeing it time and time again.
And if you don't mind, I'll chime in too. That's unsurprising because another category, Greg always goes to the economic data, the macro data, which is fascinating. Health and beauty items, those items when people are losing money and losing jobs and feel the pinch of inflation are also very popular, and they're good for resale. So not just the Class A narcotics, but the items that they can resell, which is you're seeing a lot with the organized retail crime, as well as conditions created by the economic issues created by the economic conditions. Really favor those items. So I'm not surprised that pharmacies are hit hard.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, when I go to third world countries, they want those American brands in a huge way, and they will spend about 4 times what we pay here in the United States for Crest toothpaste or whatever, because they just don't typically get those products there in those countries. They get the cheaper variations that are produced in China that might come to their country. So I've been asked to go to Liberia. I've been asked to bring cases of peanut butter with me because they can't get good peanut butter in Liberia.
The slide you mentioned earlier about taking 14 to 15 times sales to recover loss involved in the theft of one item. Food grocery, that number is 15.6% increase over last year. So that's
15.6% growth in ORC.
The one that I was kind of looking at with a little jaundiced eye is restaurants at 4%. But kind of makes sense, unless somebody's stealing stuff off of the to-go rack.
Even Animal House, they didn't go after the McDonald's; they went after the food can.
So it's interesting you say that, Lee. Some of our customers who remain nameless this is the e-com fraud potential is also great for AI to help, and that is actually one of their biggest problems is people are gaming the system, particularly as they're trying to encourage people to order through apps and build loyalty and lifetime value with their customers. They are abusing the convenience of the mobile order and pickup, and it's not $100,000; it's a 10 million plus problem.
Yeah.
And my simplest analogy to that is self-checkout at stores. I can't tell you how many of our customers we talk to, and you read about in the news too. I think there was an article just the other day about Walmart taking out self-checkout registers. And when they do that, they see sales go up 30%. And it's not surprising, right? Because, we talk about the known indicators. Like if someone scans 40 things and everything is under $1, there's a good chance, right, that they're gaming the system. So that is with restaurants, it's a big problem. It's they want this to be loss prevention, not sales prevention. That's always the challenge is, they want people to have great experience and there's a cost that goes along with it. So they're constantly trying to tune that.
Right.
There's another follow-up here for you, Brian. Are you seeing, and just ask you to expand beyond your chat response to Philip, are you seeing the use of real-time item-level data sets for AI models?
So thanks for clarifying that. Definitely at the item level data set, because that's instructive. The real time is more challenging. So I think we are not seeing a lot of that, but that I think becomes more a function of the data. So Greg touched on it, and I think if you look at the one survey, Greg, the retailer index, the AI retailer index, and the ones that are the most successful, the ones that really have their data house in order.
Yep.
So my answer here is, if you've got your data house in order and you're tagged properly, your ability to potentially see some of that come through to real time is possible. I can't think of a customer right now that's doing that. That takes a lot of work, but I do think it's possible. And there's definitely, I guess what I'm seeing now is more kind of what I would call near real time and time chunks. So maybe not by the minute or by the minute, but more by the hour block, like maybe 3 or 4 hour blocks, because we see most of our retailers, restaurants, grocers can kind of segment their business days in time chunks, and they can start to react, in those time periods where they can make adjustments within the day and they don't have to wait a day or a week. So it's coming. I don't think it's quite there yet. There's a lot that has to happen to make that work.
Yeah. This one's for you, Greg. Which segments of retail are leading in the use of AI?
Well, leading in there. So who's most ahead? I don't know if it's by segment as much as it's by size of retailer and the type of retailer that are there. It's your Amazon, your Walmart, your Kroger, your Home Depot, Target is in there as well. Those are your leaders. There's a huge benefit to scale. You just can't get past it there. But they have been investing in these technologies for quite a while there. But if I had to say one segment that was above the others, it would be the either the top 3 mass merchant supply or warehouse club guys, or the guys in grocery, the top 10 in grocery in terms of being ahead of others. But there are pockets. You've got people like Tapestry, for instance, that's doing incredible stuff in the fashion area. They saw 3 to 5% sales uptick with using generative AI tools there. So that's my thought. I mean, Brian, are you guys?
I similarly, it's the folks that have invested more in the infrastructure that are starting to get the return. So don't know that I'm seeing it by sector or subsector. So, like retail specialty, or big box retailer. But I do agree with you that there is some correlation to scale, but it's all tied into how much they've generally invested into the data.
Right.
And also how serious everyone's serious about it, but how much they can really invest in this. And the part that's almost heartbreaking is that the stores that are hit the hardest are the ones in our communities we probably need the most.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
And even as a parent of young adults and teenagers, you have to think about, would you let your kids go work there? And so this is just
Right.
It's tough. It's really, really tough.
Yep. Yeah.
One last question. This is going to be a real quickie. What are the most important customer data sets that you need to access that have the most efficient AI solution? POS, cameras?
It's wherever you have the cleanest data.
Yeah, you need
Wherever
POS,
you have the cleanest.
you need item, you need location, you need HR, you need loyalty. If your e-com data is not coming through your POS, you need that.
Yeah.
If you get camera metadata, if you get serialized RDs, if you get RF sensors, it really all has a multiplicative effect. The more, the better. And you clean it up and you start using it together, and it really is powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, there are no shortcuts when it comes to real significant gains. You can make some gains with generative AI in the sales and general administrative stuff without having your data in order. You can make some gains. You can't make huge gains, and you can make zero gains. You'll go backwards if you try to do that with AI ML technology with bad data.
Yep.
So,
Top of the hour.
all right. Well, thanks everybody. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. We actually maxed out the webinar for the first time ever. There that we went past the numbers of seats that we had allocated. So that's a tribute to the topic, and we just thank you for your attention, for being with us. Stay safe, everybody, and talk soon.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.